but it feels like outrage because when you are in the privileged position, when you are the standard, anything that's not that feels like it's challenging your privileges. Like you feeling worried or that deep dark skinned South Sudanese models are everyone taking over is challenging the position that light skinned people should be the standard of blackness whenever it is shown. And when Beyonce wanted to go and do that light skin porch, I didn't see people talking about, oh, why is everybody light skinned on that porch? So you're not going to give me this fake propaganda that, oh my God, dark skinned South Sudanese girls is everywhere. They're not everywhere. They're literally less than 5%. There is actually more mixed race, racially ambiguous, light skinned girls in the modeling industry than South Sudanese girls. Be very serious with yourself.
Sometimes it don't make no sense. Does it really have to? There is nothing I can say.
Hi, welcome to Mayowa's World. Hi y'all, welcome to Mayowa's World. My name is Mayowa, and on my platform I talk about colorism, featureism, texturism. Today we're going to be talking about the dislike of extremely African features, which actually falls pretty much under featureism. Before I get into that mess, I want to talk about the fact that last week was my birthday, and I decided to spend my birthday by going to Charleston, South Carolina, and connecting with Gullah Geechee culture. Ever since I was a kid and watched Gullah Island, I fell deeply in love with Gullah Geechee culture. I also watched Daughters of the Dust, which deepened my love for Gullah Geechee culture, and I wanted to make sure that I spent my birthday honoring the ancestors that were stolen along the transatlantic slave trade. So I did a Gullah Geechee tour by this wonderful girl called Akua, and that tour, like, she is such a powerhouse. Like, she was able to speak about the history in such an honest way that made me feel so appreciative. It made me feel so deeply appreciative to the work that African American people have done, and it made me have a deeper appreciation for the ancestors that we lost along the way via transatlantic slave trade. I would recommend going to Akua, and this is her social media handles. Book her if you go to Charleston, South Carolina, because yeah, she's really doing the Lord's work. Like, she's really doing fantastic work. So I don't know if y'all have seen, but Versace is under some hot water for making comments that people find to be offensive. If you guys don't know who Versace is someone who was originally a viral internet kid, and very popular on Vine. And as he got older, he's transitioned more into becoming a fantastic producer for a lot of very known celebrities. I want to read out the tweet that Versace said and essentially give my thoughts. Versace says, "Why does it seem like you gotta look extremely African in order to be a successful black model? I don't like that." And then someone responds, "All the males are dark skinned with big lips and high cheekbones. I rarely see African American looking guys walking in these shows." And Versace says, "On God." A lot of people were defending Versace and saying that there was a misunderstanding. They were saying that Versace was speaking to the fact that the modeling industry only highlights a certain kind of black model. And a lot of people online were saying that this was a critique on the fact that there are so many South Sudanese models who are constantly booked and dominate the runway and the modeling industry. And I'm going to say that a propaganda that I will never fall for is that South Sudanese model dominate the modeling industry. I think that because the modeling industry is so white and so racially ambiguous and so light, that when we see deep dark-skinned models, it creates this narrative that they are more prominent than they are. And I also think that people are misinterpreting hypervisibility for being a very successful, popular model. I would say a lot of deep, dark-skinned Sudanese people are hypervisible. I would not say that they are dominant in the modeling industry, and I have the stats to prove it. Because what I decided to do was to go to the top 3 modeling industries in the world and count how many dark-skinned models I see, and also count how many light-skinned and or racially ambiguous models who I think look like they are part black, who I also see, and I'm going to actually include the numbers. So the first modeling agency I'm looking at is IMG Models, and I am looking out of New York. I'm focusing on women because a lot of the discourse where I've seen people talking about South Sudanese models has been the women. I'm going to count the amount of dark-skinned women that we see on the screen. In total, there are 206 models. So I ended up counting 25 light skin models with IMG and anywhere between 15 to 16 dark skin models with IMG. And then I also looked at Wilhelmina models, and there are 85 models in total, and there are only 2 dark skinned girls, and there are no South Sudanese girls, and there are 12 light skinned girls. And then we go to Storm models. There's 130 models that are women. There's only 5 dark skinned models, and of those 5, only 3 of them are South Sudanese, and 17 of these women are light skinned models. So what I think happens is that because there are a few very successful South Sudanese models who are often in a lot of shows, it creates this idea, there's hypervisibility amongst all South Sudanese models. But I really think it's probably just 3 South Sudanese models that we see the most, and we have convinced ourselves that that is a lot. And it actually isn't, especially because in every modeling agency that I've searched, and I've searched 5 of them, literally, there are more light-skinned women in every modeling agency than dark-skinned women every single time. And then there are a minority of South Sudanese models. The way that people talk about South Sudanese models, you would think that they are the only people being booked all the time. I am also somebody who has been in the modeling industry, and I have noticed certain things being a dark-skinned woman in the modeling industry. While I was modeling in Germany, I was literally told by my modeling agent that I will not have as much success as a light-skinned woman or a racially ambiguous woman in the modeling industry. And I had been to endless amount of castings where a racially ambiguous light-skinned person was picked over a dark-skinned person. I will say that within the dark-skinned arena of the modeling industry, things that seem to be popular is when a dark-skinned girl has her hair shaved. But I think that the reason that they're shaving their hair isn't for a glorious high fashion look. I think they're shaving their hair because they don't know how to do the hair. They don't know how to do 4C hair, so they keep it cut short. I have never heard of a light-skinned model or a racially ambiguous model being forced to shave her head, especially if she's someone who benefits from texturism. If she's somebody who has a looser hair texture, she is definitely going to keep her hair. I have seen people have deep dark-skinned models that are being selected, and I do think that there has been a rise of people wanting to have South Sudanese models or deep dark-skinned models in agencies. But from this study, like from looking at the agencies, the percentage is under like 5%, guys. Like there is less than 5% of the models. And within the dark skin models being selected, I see people who are on the lighter spectrum of being dark skinned, and I also see people who are deep dark skinned. So I don't really understand why people are saying that South Sudanese people are dominating the modeling industry, or that is the only models being picked. What Versace's tweet reeks of to me is colorism and xenophobia. I feel like I've seen a rise of colorist and anti-African sentiment on the internet. And the thing that I didn't like about Versace's tweet and the follow-up tweet that he agreed with is this idea of African-American looking people. Because I've seen tweets online. I saw this post that says, do they look the same to you, to show that one is Africans and one is foundational Black Americans or African Americans. And there is this sentiment that people think that African Americans look more racially ambiguous. And I think there is active propaganda to make African Americans seem more racially ambiguous than the reality, in a similar way to what happened to Brazil. Like if y'all look to Brazil, they made Brazil seem like Brazil is a land of racially ambiguous people. I remember being younger and literally not knowing that dark-skinned Black Brazilians existed, because the representation of Afro-Brazilian or Black Brazilian was that they were like a post-racial society. Like I've literally heard Brazil being called as a post-racial society. And you've also had people who were intentionally blurring the lines, right? I remember when people said that everyone in Brazil looked like Adriana Lima. And the fact that Adriana Lima in an interview has identified as an Afro-Brazilian.
I'm Afro-Brazilian, girl, and my family is all mixed with Japanese, Black, and West Indian. Yeah, very exotic.
Just kind of shows the intentional racial mixing, because Adriana Lima knows deep in her heart she would never have been considered a Afro-Brazilian. She's not Black. Like for her to say she's an Afro-Brazilian, it's disingenuous, right? It's trying to catch on to an exotic label to kind of push your career a little bit. Like, yes, in my country, I'm Black. And Dash Online has mentioned how she thinks that
a lot of things happening in the US has been happening in Latin America for generations at this point. And so when it finally gets to the US, whatever issue, problem, challenge that comes out it has already been happening in the region already. For example, they're recharacterizing slavery as something else. They're taking out, the CRT. They're taking out any traces of any type of interrogation around white pathology. And I'm like, yeah, that's Latin America 101. Again, the idea of the post-racial, especially after Obama, right? The post-racial, I'm like, that's mestizaje. Mm-hmm. I just think it's interesting. Like, people really, these things don't happen in a vacuum. All of this is connected.
And in some ways, I feel like America is heading in that same direction. And one of those ways of doing that is to make African Americans seem like they are all light-skinned, racially ambiguous people. And I'm somebody who lives in the South. I grew up in the South. So when I drive around the South, when I was in South Carolina, I saw a lot of people who looked like they could be my siblings. Perfect example is Akua, the girl who I did the tour with. She literally looks like she could be in my family. So there's people who are Akua's complexion, the people who are darker than Akua. So I saw many deep dark skinned people even too when I went to New Orleans. And I feel like that was something that I also realized was, in my mind, I thought that when I went to New Orleans, literally everybody would be racially ambiguous, or how we speak of Creole looking, which I've come to realize, like, there's no look of Creole. Like, you can be a dark skinned person and be Creole, but there has been like a light skindification of certain things, right? So when I went to New Orleans and I saw a lot of deep dark skinned people, I was like, wow, look at marketing, right? Because every time I see a film that's set in New Orleans, I've seen a lot of light skinned people. So I think it's really important that we are aware of how colorism plays a role in how we want to see the future, and also how we see that dark skin is a thing of the past. When Jay Versace says, why does it seem like you gotta look extremely African in order to be a successful Black model? I just thought it was a bit ridiculous, because Jay Versace looks extremely African. Jay Versace looks like he could be from Guinea. Jay Versace looks like he could be from Nigeria. So I don't know if he's saying that as if he is included in that category, or if he sees himself as somebody who's on the outside. I am someone who's a Nigerian American person, so I am a Yoruba person, Nigerian person who grew up here in the States. We can acknowledge that African American people are people who have been kidnapped along the transatlantic slave trade, and they are people who come from Western and Central Africa. So there's going to definitely be overlaps of African Americans who look Nigerian, or Nigerians who look African American, or Jamaicans who look Congolese, and Congolese people who look like they could be from Alabama. And some people might ask, why do you differentiate African Americans from West Africans? African Americans are Africans. I think it's also still very important for us to acknowledge the identity of African American people, and that plight of people who are taken to a foreign land and have been living there for over 400 years. So the same way that I think that I don't want to say, oh, African Americans are just Africans, when obviously they have their own distinct experiences. And there have been a lot of Black people who have been stolen and kidnapped to foreign lands in the diaspora. Perfect example would be the Sidi people of India. Those are people who are originally from Africa, trafficked, and have been in India for hundreds of years, right? Another example would be Afro-Palestinians, people who are also trafficked, kidnapped to Palestine and have been there for hundreds of years. So I think, it's important for us to understand the distinctions of each group. Same with the Caribbean. Each group has their own distinctions. But if I have seen images of people who are Sidi people from India, the Black people who are from India, they look like they could literally be my cousins. And I've seen people who are from the Caribbean who look like they could literally be my cousins. So I think it's important to acknowledge that although we have our distinctions, it's really pretty much our flavors. The same way that red rice, jollof rice, wolof rice, there's different variations of jollof rice, but it's all within the category of rice. That is kind of how I see it. Like, I feel like the biggest differentiation between an African American and a Nigerian or a Ghanaian is the mannerisms and the flavor that you add to yourself. But a lot of times if you see images, it's going to be hard to tell. But on the continent and within African American perspective, both struggle with colorism. I feel like there's a deep hatred of African features when it came to Olandria.
Look better, Clark or Olandria? He said Clark looked better because Olandria got a strong ass face. That's probably exactly how Taylor feels, actually. Like, Olandria is very masculine looking. Like, did y'all not peep that?
Because Olandria is someone who people literally thought was Nigerian. And the people who are often affected by colorism and texturism and featureism often will be the same ones who people cannot tell the difference between if you're from the continent or if you're not, which is why in school, the people who are often called African booty scratchers were not just Africans. It was people who were affected by colorism, people who were affected by texturism. Those are also the people who were called African booty scratchers. And African Americans is catching strays because they haven't even been to the continent, and they're still being told that they're this derogatory word, because that is not a word exclusive to Africans. It's exclusive to what we associate with Africa, which is a broad nose, bigger lips, kinky hair, dark skin. And when it comes to the modeling industry, light-skinned women and racially ambiguous women have been literally reigning in modeling for years. And the thing that gets me is that when light-skinned people are the face of essentially anything, that is the norm, right? Like, light-skinned women are the face of music. Racially ambiguous women is the face of hip-hop. Racially ambiguous women is the face of R&B. To the point where it's so normalized within hip-hop music for women to literally boast about being light-skinned. Glorilla has so many songs where she mentions her being light-skinned, her being a red bone, her being light. And that is the norm. I see very minimal pushback about things like that, right? And when it comes to modeling, we all remember the Joan Smalls, we all remember the Chanel Imans, we all remember the Barbies, and all the other models who have been light-skinned, racially ambiguous in general. And that was seen as normal. That was seen as high fashion. And, a lot of times when we look at the ways that South Sudanese models are depicted in fashion, it's often not like the best depiction either. Like, and a perfect example is this image that was used here, and how they were depicted, and how it was like a flattening, a dryness, how they all had to have a weave. And even within South Sudanese models, they either are going to have their hair shaved because people cannot do 4C hair, or they're going to have a wig that is straight. You will rarely see them have grown out natural hair because of this tipping scale I spoke about in my last video, where people don't want to see dark-skinned people have their natural hair out and enjoy their blackness as it is. Like, there's always something that has to give. So I don't think, I don't see deep South Sudanese models being love interests in movies. I don't see South Sudanese models being seen as the women of desire in film or even in modeling photo shoots. I don't see those things. So this idea that they're taking up a lot of space reminds me of the same pushback that when Halle Bailey had when she played in The Little Mermaid. Like, people were so butthurt that Halle Bailey, a black girl, was going to play Ariel, that they were like, well, if she does it, then there's going to be loads of people that do it. And it's like, it only happened one time. And like, we know that the next Ariel movie, they're probably not going to cast another black girl, but it feels like outrage, because when you are in the privileged position, when you are the standard, anything that's not that feels like it's challenging your privileges. Like, you feeling worried, or that deep dark skinned South Sudanese models are everyone taking over, is challenging the position that light skinned people should be the standard of blackness whenever it is shown. And of course, light skinned, racially ambiguous women will not have the same opportunities as white women, but let's not act like for decades that hasn't been the standard. South Sudanese models will still often be the ones who are the most failed when it comes to people who can properly do their makeup correctly, properly do their hair correctly, and showcase them in a way that feels fully human. So South Sudanese people are preyed on in the modeling industry. The modeling industry in general is an industry of preying on people. Like, it is a corrupt industry. Like, even being seen as like, oh, it's cool to be a model. First off, modeling doesn't pay. People don't talk about how much modeling does not pay, right? Like, it doesn't pay like people think it pays. It used to pay back in the day. It doesn't pay like people think it pays. In general, they go to Eastern European to go and get these alien looking white girls and put them on runways, right? Like, they also will go to get South Sudanese refugees who are here and doing the same thing. But we can only imagine how much harder it will be for South Sudanese models because of anti-blackness. Like, I need us to turn it on, because it's kind of starting to feel like, oh, reverse colorism. Like, there's so many of them. Like, they're everywhere. They're taking over. Like, relax. And when Beyonce wanted to go and do that light skin porch, I didn't see people talking about, oh, why is everybody light skin on that porch? I didn't see the outrage of the light skin porch girls. So you're not gonna give me this fake propaganda that, oh my God, dark skin South Sudanese girls is everywhere. They're not everywhere. They're literally less than 5%. There is actually more mixed race, racially ambiguous, light-skinned girls in the modeling industry than South Sudanese girls. Be very serious with yourself. But there are so many dark-skinned African-American people that literally people think are African. So you're not going to make me feel like it's a rarity when you see a African-American person who looks African. So you guys aren't going to convince me that deep dark-skinned people are only over there and they're not in the US. and we need to be really cognizant to catch this, because it can be a slippery slope into more xenophobia, more Afrophobia. And the thing that made me also really upset about the whole Jay Versace thing is the fact that Jay Versace literally practices Ifa. Like, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like Jay Versace is a child of Obatala. And last time I checked, Obatala is a very extremely African looking Orisha. So I don't really understand. And like, this is something that I need to make a video about, but the way that people want to kind of like separate African spirituality from Africanness, like a lot of times people who are like leading the way and having discourse around Ifa and Isheshe are people who are literally not Black, or people who are very racially ambiguous. And even the light skinification of Oshun or Yemoja or different women in Ifa. Like, I'm so sorry, you cannot practice African spirituality and not like Africans. That at the base foundation, that is like one of the most important requirements. Yeah, so I don't know, like, I don't like that. So yes, I love extremely African features. And if you are an extremely African feature, if you look extremely African, let me know in the chat. But yes, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.